My grandfather was an artist. People couldn't get enough of his paintings. I loved his sad winter landscapes most of all since I was a child. However, he is remembered not at all for his depictions of nature, but for his portraits. Grandfather created peculiar portraits. He could not lie to the canvas, so he painted people as they really are. It's amazing how he understood from the threshold of a good or bad person. Maybe he had a gift. I still don't understand how he did it. Sometimes beautiful people with perfect figures and beautiful shiny clothes came to him, but on the canvas some ugly creatures instead of shining beauties. Of course, after such works on grandfather, many people took offense. Sometimes it came to fights, and sometimes, on the contrary, came to him completely unattractive, dimly dressed, simple, and sometimes even with injuries, people whom he portrayed stunningly beautiful. He could not lie to himself and never refused anyone. People kept coming to him with the assurance that they were bound to turn out to be good. I remember my grandfather telling me when I was a little girl, "Never lie to yourself. If I see that a person is evil, not good, I will never paint him beautiful. He doesn't deserve it. He's not beautiful in reality." The outer shell means almost nothing. Maybe because of his inability to lie to himself, and the canvas grandfather never became famous, and even made many enemies during his life, especially among the powerful. Many people thought he was crazy and even tried to impose this opinion on me. But I know for sure that my grandfather was quite an adequate man. He just had a gift. There were many talents and he was in their power, and I loved him very much and never thought he was crazy. Grandfather died in a fire in his house. That's how almost all of his work disappeared. There was nothing left but one small painting of an ugly woman with messy hair and a face covered with sores on her greenish-purple skin. This portrait lay in a barn that the fire had not touched. So it was the only work of my grandfather's that survived. And I grieved for a long time. There was an investigation, but it didn't come to anything. The prosecutor's office cited bad wiring in the house, so the whole thing went up in flames. I could literally feel someone lurking in the dark corner. He wasn't doing anything to me, but he was definitely there, and I don't think it was friendly. After a while, I started to not just feel, but see something in my apartment. With my side vision, I noticed some kind of movement, as if someone had run past very quickly, leaving behind a slight chill. I was terrified and frightened when I saw something like that. But I never believed in ghosts and other evil things, so I found different explanations every time. I thought I was only seeing these things because I was sick and imagining things. The nights in the apartment became very cold. Although it was spring and it was warm enough, I covered myself with 2 blankets to keep warm, but it didn't help much. One day I woke up to the fact that I didn't have any blankets on, and someone was pressing on my chest with such force that I almost couldn't breathe. There was steam coming out of my mouth. I wanted to jump up in terror, but suddenly I realized that my whole body was literally absorbent cotton. Neither my arms nor legs moved. I was desperately short of air. Something kept pressing down on me. I could barely make out something barely recognizable through the veil in front of me. A horrible thing, something the size of a grown man perhaps, that sat on my chest and turned me into an immobile vegetable. Then the veil abruptly lifted and I could see a woman with long dark hair on my chest. She was horribly ugly. Her fingers were long, with huge black claws. She was grinning vilely, greenish saliva dripping from her mouth, and I mustered up the strength to scream, at which point everything abruptly disappeared. There was no one on top of me, and I could breathe again. All night I sat up with the light, crying for a long time. I didn't have any strength. I didn't understand anything, what she was and what she wanted here. No one had ever lived in my apartment before. I bought it right after this high-rise building was built. No one died during the construction. No one could curse me, so what's the trouble? And this terrible woman was everywhere, following me everywhere in every dark corner. I almost stopped sleeping at night because I knew that she would come again and want to do something to me. As an atheist, I didn't know any prayers, never believed in anyone. So I didn't know where to look for salvation from my creepy visitor. I still felt sick. She kept up. Sometimes I would find her by my bed in the middle of the night. She'd just stand or sit on the carpet and gape with her ugly, rotten mouth. I think she was feeding on my life, and I was fading away before my eyes. This vile lady, on the other hand, was becoming more and more visible and stronger. At times I would find her figure in the moonlight, swaying and sitting on the floor of my room. She was always breathing heavily, her whole body a ball of nerves. I was so scared. Only tears ran down my cheeks, and I couldn't do anything. One day, this creature sat right at my feet and just stared at me with its horrible eyes. At that moment I thought I was going crazy, either from fear or from the fact that I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sometimes she would hold my arms or legs when I was just walking somewhere in the apartment. Sometimes it was a light movement, and sometimes I was literally swept away, and I was afraid of myself. I wanted to crawl into the farthest corner and not crawl out of there. I was sick and scared to the point of being sick and scared. My hair started to fall out a lot, and I kept having suicidal thoughts. I had never thought about it before, but now constantly these dark thoughts wouldn't leave me. And I suddenly realized that no one needed me anymore, that everyone had turned away from me, and that no one would be upset if I was gone, but I would be free. One morning I woke up and found my own hair next to me. It had just been cut like it had been taken in a bunch and just brushed once, and I was hysterical. And that thing got even stronger. It was already going to hurt me in the future. Real bad. Not just scare me. It made me look terrible. The clue to what was happening came by accident. I was walking down the hallway in my apartment, stumbled and accidentally touched my late grandfather's painting. It fell to the floor with a crash. The canvas flew out of the frame. At that moment, I felt a sharp jolt in my back and flew after the portrait. My nose was shattered and blood was pouring out. It hurt like hell, but at that moment I realized it was the portrait. I jumped up, turned around. There was nothing behind me, but I guessed who had pushed me. At least now I knew what it was about. It was the painting. How could I not have known? My life had been a living hell since that painting came into my house. I tried many times to get rid of this face. I took it to the trash several times, but every time this thing was back on my doorstep or on the wall, as if I had never taken it off. I thought I was going crazy. Powerlessness and despair made me go to an old acquaintance of mine who had possessed certain powers from childhood that I had never believed in. She assured me that she could see more than all other people. But, as I mentioned earlier, I never took such things seriously. Helen greeted me, thankfully, cordially. I was so afraid that she wouldn't even want to talk to me, because we had rarely spoken to each other lately and there was always a lot of disagreement between us. Helen held my hand, looked into my eyes, then performed some kind of ritual behind a screen. I wasn't allowed to see it for some reason, and finally she was able to give her verdict. Yes, the girl in the painting was really to blame for my problems. The thing is, she was a terrible person when she was alive. Her father was very rich and raised her to be greedy, covetous, instilled an unhealthy self-love. Helen saw clearly how this girl humiliated others, hurt, brought to tears, and even to suicide. Such a horrible person she was. When her friend said all this, she had tears welling up in her eyes, as if she felt the same way as the people who had been hurt by this lady's sharp tongue. The girl got to my grandfather not too long ago. Of course, she was pissed off by the outcome of the job, and then there was a fire in his house. Her portrait miraculously survived, though it shouldn't have. It was all her fault. She killed my grandfather. But misfortune befell her as well. A few days after the fire, she was found in the woods. She was exhausted and murdered. At that moment, I remembered hearing about it on the news just after my grandfather's death. This girl, the daughter of some big businessman, was found deep in the woods. She'd been tortured for a long time before she was killed. Supposedly one of her guards did it. After that, Helen also saw her father die. He couldn't bear it and took his own life. Died in agony from an overdose of some kind of substance. I listened to this, and the last thing I heard was hair-splitting. My acquaintance paused all the time. She often felt sick. From the outside, it seemed as if she was watching movies somewhere in her head and predicting them to me. It was very unusual, but I'd seen enough damn things lately that I didn't have the energy to wonder. Helen finished her story, sighed heavily, and told me to bring the painting to her. We'll get rid of it. The next day, the painting was already burning in some kind of ritual fire. I don't know how Helen built it or what she threw on it, but it was a magnificent flame. The painting was burning with a whoosh. There was a column of black smoke and a foul, rotten odor in the air. So we stood with her alone in the middle of the field, burning the ugly face. Helen was praying all the time. I guess she had to, I don't know. After a while it stopped. Nobody ever came to see me again. It never came back. My hair grew back, the sores on my face went away, and my health was no longer so bad. After that incident, I began to believe in many things. And I also realized what my grandfather had said. He was right when he said that appearance does not play any important role. It's the person inside that counts. He could see that, and he was never wrong. I can see it now. Maybe it's a result of the stress I've been under, maybe it's hereditary. But now I can see almost instantly what the person in front of me is like. I hope this gift will stay with me for the rest of my life.